hour. And this is going to take a moment for it to log on. Everything's been very slow this morning. Do you find that sometimes? Some days your computer works well, and other days it's really slow? We'll eventually get to the point where we're at in and I just got moving it again. I'm on twice. I'm in two different computers, so here we are. I need to join in again. Oh, technology. There we are. That's what I wanted to see. Okay. So we were talking about John Calvin and the various changes that he made to Lutheranism, which will become its own religion called Calvinism. And in Calvinism, there are a number of important items. Probably the most important of them is that John Calvin does not believe at all in free will. Luther at least had some sentiment of free will, like if you wanted, and I'm gone again. Okay, give me 5 seconds. I'm going to, probably more like 3 minutes. I'm going to turn my camera off and my mic off and get myself all on one. Okay, so it'll all be on one. So this will take me a minute.
If you can't get your computers fixed, can we just have this class work on the essay?
Okay, what can you see now? Can you see anything?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Just let me.
If they break again, can we just have the rest of the class to work on the essay?
Who's asking me that?
Me, Patrick?
Yeah. No, because it's just a PowerPoint. Okay. So it just gives us some pictures that we're looking at. But there might be one thing that I can do. Anyway, okay, I'll figure it out another time. Here's my advanced settings button, but that's okay. All right, so you can see the PowerPoint, I can't, or I can see the PowerPoint and I can't see you. But that's okay because I know what the images are that are in it. Right, so look, with Calvinism, the idea that we don't have free will at all, that God already knows from the beginning of time who's saved and who is not. That's a really important point, a really important difference in the way people are going to act and behave. And in the case of this particular religious movement, it made the Calvinists very, very, very militant, very unrelenting on the people in their community. You are not behaving, you're doing this, you are doing that, and it makes us all look bad. It makes us all look like we are not the special people. What else was also very important about Calvinism was Calvin's idea that the state has to be under control of the religious community. So he'll actually set up some practice communities. He sets up a community. Here's more of my head. Rather than my forehead. He sets up a practice community in Geneva, Switzerland, where the church did run and control everything that was going on. So it was all the people within the church who became the community leaders, and it was really, really, really successful, partly because it was ordinary people suddenly having importance and power and influence beyond what they'd ever possibly imagined. You could be a peasant and become a very important person in your religious community. You could be female and become a very important person. So these were things that were very attractive to people. Most of Switzerland today is still Calvinist. It started there, and then it will spread elsewhere. It was truly, in a sense, the grassroots movement. This was really people coming together and democratically saying, this is what we want, and making it happen. So politically, Calvinism was very attractive. There were some economic impacts of Calvinism as well. The economic impacts come out of that Renaissance time period. We talked about the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance and how there was a difference between those. That in the Italian Renaissance, it was about the wealth and the beauty and the ornamentation of your life around you. But in the Northern Renaissance, it seemed to be more focused on what can I create, what can I make, what do I produce? And so it was the hard work, the labor that you put in, that was representative of the Renaissance in the North. And we see this expanded on by John Calvin. That idea that honest work is pleasing to God. If you want to demonstrate you're one of the few, one of those saved 144,000, then you work hard. Right? So if you're a shoemaker, you make the best possible shoes that you can. It's not being held back by the guilds, by the rules that have been put in place. You want to make the best that you possibly can. If you're a merchant, you sell people the best quality material at the most reasonable prices. Right? So you're not trying to rip people off. You're not trying to get more money. It's not at all about accumulation of wealth. Right? John Calvin will add on some extra sort of rules in place about what you do with the wealth that you create. Obviously, if you work hard at your job, you are going to get more money from your job. That's usually the way it goes. I know it doesn't always go that way, but that's usually the way jobs work. So obviously, Calvinists, we already know that they're plain people, that they're not into the material stuff. Plain clothes, plain houses, they don't spend money on themselves. So John Calvin says all the money you make from your business, you can't spend it on yourself. So what are options that you could spend the money on? If you can't spend it on yourself, right, you can't spend it buying your kids a horse, you can't spend it taking vacations in the South, Okay, what could you spend your money on?
Like giving it to the church, maybe, or like just donating it.
Donating it to the poor, giving it to the church, right? Those are two things that we think about. Those sound like those would be godly Christian things to do with your money. Right? Calvin had a problem with both of those. Okay? One, give it to the church. What's the church going to do with it? Beautify the church? Okay? Put in nice ornaments and paintings in the church? No. Okay, this was a real no, and that's that slide that you see here. The Calvinist church is a very, very plain church. Okay? The only ornamentation that was allowed in the church was the cross. And it had to be a plain cross. It couldn't be the crucifix. That is a cross with Jesus dying on it. It had to be the very, very, very plain. And you can see this Calvinist church. There's no decorations on the wall. Doesn't mean it's an ugly church. Just there is no decoration or decor. It's very simple. As opposed to the Catholic churches, which of course were ornamentation every single square inch of the church if they wanted to do. Okay? So you couldn't give it to the church to make a beautiful church. You also couldn't give your money to the poor. Right? And this sounds weird, but when you hear it, maybe you'll go, oh, okay, I sort of see that. If you give money to the poor, so that the poor can use that money to get their food and clothe themselves and house themselves, then what's the incentive for the poor people to work hard? If you give money to the poor, you are taking away that opportunity of the poor people to demonstrate, I'm one of the saved, I'm one of the few, because you demonstrated that by working hard. Sound weird? Yeah, okay, I think so. It is part of, we can see this in the United States of America today. The United States, a lot of the founding English, French, Dutch people who moved into the United States were of Calvinist tradition. And we can still see that in the States today. This very big idea of work hard. Don't give money to poor people. Right? They need to work for it. Don't give medical care to poor people. They need to work for it. I work hard to pay my $1,100 a month in my health insurance. Right? And if there's some person who doesn't bother to work hard for it, then they don't deserve their health insurance, right? We see this attitude very much. So, Aiden, great ideas, but not allowed in Calvinism. Neither one of them. What was allowed was for you to put your money back into your business. So again, if you were a shoemaker and you made extra money, right, open up another shoemaker shop, hire some more people, get some more, some nicer quality leather. If you're a merchant, expand the field of products that you deliver. And you see that Calvinist people could get fairly wealthy. If you grow your business, then you make more profit off of your bigger business that you have. Okay? Calvinists will be very important in the next phase that we look at. I think we look at it next, but we will look at it soon, and that is some of the economic changes that will happen. Right? That will change Europe from the sort of very local economic system into a regional and global, and Calvinists will be a part of that because of this belief. Pour the money back into your business again. What do we call somebody who has money to invest in a business? Besides an investor, what's the other word that we use for that? Starts with a C. In opposition to that Soviet system of economics. What's the opposite of communism?
Capitalism.
Capitalism. Yeah, exactly. Okay. But we have not in Europe developed yet a capitalist system, but the Calvinists will be very important. Okay. So Calvinism will spread from Switzerland to other nations and to other ethnicities. It is not a national religion like Lutheranism was. It'll spread to Bohemia and Hungary. both places that are feeling very much the thumb of Austrian, which is German, oppression over them. It'll spread to France. What are the Calvinists called in France? You've met them already in your reading.
The Huguenots?
Oh, yeah, the Huguenots, the Huguenots, okay. They will spread to Scotland, where they become known as Presbyterians, and most of Scotland is still Presbyterian today. It'll spread to England, where they will become the Puritans, and then the English will spread it to America. And so we have this Calvinist religion crossing borders, crossing ethnicities, and becoming a very, very, very popular and prominent religion. Okay. So, look, obviously in your reading, you are seeing, those are the borders, okay, and you can see the little green dots are the Calvinists, and they're all over the place in Europe. They're not cross borders. You can see in your reading that you have that obviously these religious troubles are going to really blow up between Spain and the Netherlands, within France itself, and within the Holy Roman Empire itself. In all three cases resulting in wars, which is what we're studying and working on. England will be a different story. England will deal with these Calvinist, Lutheran, Protestant reforms, but in their own way. And this is a story of love, murder, death, intrigue, romance, occasionally at times. It's a neat story. Okay, so I thought we'd spend some time today going over this story. England is under the rule of Henry VIII. Here he is here, a very young man, as he is pictured here. And he is married to the Spanish princess, Catherine of Aragon. Here she is when the two of them were married to each other. Now remember, Henry VIII is the son of Henry VII. Do you remember who Henry VII was? We met him. Sound familiar? Henry VII, Henry Tudor. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was from like the War of the Roses thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So because Henry VIII's father was Henry VII, and Henry VII had pulled together that warring England, this England that had gone through 60 years of that civil wars of the Roses, it is very, very, very important for Henry VIII it was one of his most important jobs, was to ensure the durability of the Tudor line. If he doesn't have a son, what's going to happen to England? Right? Right? It's going to blow up into war. Right? His father has brought those two warring families together. He needs to make sure that the line continues on so that it doesn't break up into war again. Okay? So for Henry...
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Catherine of Aragon, she was the Queen of Spain, right?
Yeah. She was the daughter of the King of Spain at the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so she's from Spain. This is bringing together those two important countries, England and Spain, bringing them together. Remember, we've talked about political marriages before. You make friends between countries by marrying the kids off to each other. They're not going to go after each other anymore. So this is very, very, very important for Henry and Catherine to have boy children together. Girl children's okay in England, isn't it? But boy children is better. What was I going to say? There's one more thing I want to say about Catherine of Aragon. Okay, it just so happens that she is the aunt of Charles V. the Holy Roman Emperor. So she has a connection with that Holy Roman Empire. She's Charles V's aunt. And it's going to come to play in the story later on. She obviously has very powerful connection. Is this good for England to make that union then between England and Spain?
Oh, for sure.
Or because it makes that connection then with the Holy Roman Empire. Now, another thing I want you to know about Henry, he has to have boys. Henry is also a very devout Catholic. Okay, he is very, very, very big supporter of the Catholic Church. And when Henry comes to power, Luther has just gotten started on his work. So in the early 1520s. So before Luther has become super radical, before there's a Lutheran church that is created, but Luther has started to fight back against the Catholic Church, Henry becomes involved. He writes a pamphlet, which basically means he writes a long essay describing why there should be 7 sacraments. And he calls it In Defense of the Faith. He writes that, he publishes that. Okay, no problem, Isaac. He writes that, he publishes it, he sends it out so that everybody in the Roman Catholic world can read it. The Pope loves Henry VIII, gives him a new title, creates a coin with Henry's picture on it, and Defender of the Faith written on the coin. Okay, this is 1521, just to get a timeline. Okay, so 2 things about Henry. Has to have a son, and really, really, really likes Catholicism to the point that he is going public with it. Okay. Now, the unfortunate thing is that between Henry and Catherine, she gets pregnant a number of times. We don't know exactly how many. She has miscarriages. She has stillbirths. There are 2 boys that are born. One dies within a couple of days. There are girls that are born, and they are born stillborn, or they die within hours of birth. So she is able to get pregnant, but she is not carrying a baby to term. She does manage, finally, to give birth to a healthy baby girl named Mary. Mary, the daughter, is okay, but maybe not good enough for England at this point in time. What's probably more secure is that England have a male heir to really continue the strength of this Tudor line. Remember, it's that fear that England will blow up into major civil war if there is not. So Henry decides that he needs to divorce his wife, Catherine, and get a new one that will give birth to boys. Okay. By the way, at that time period, it was believed that it was women who determined the sex of the child. We now know that it's not, right? You do know that from your biology classes. But at the time, it was believed that, yes, it was the woman's fault. Not that it's anybody's fault, but that it was what was going on with the woman if the child came out as male or female. Okay, now, Henry wants a divorce. Can you get a divorce if you're a strong, devout Catholic?
Yes.
Even today, if you're a strong, devout Catholic, depending on the Catholic church that you belong to, they will not allow you to get divorced, or you get divorced, but then you're not really welcome back into the church community again. Yeah.
Maybe they can get the marriage annulled if that's more acceptable, I think.
That is more acceptable. Okay. So this is what Henry does. He says, can I have the marriage annulled? And to annul a marriage, it's a church writes you a letter that basically says this marriage never happened. Okay? Well, that's a bit difficult. There's a longer story behind this. Sorry if you're finding the story already long, but there's something that went on behind this. And that is what I haven't told you yet. Whoops. There we are. Sorry, I missed that. Let me go back. This is Henry's pamphlet that he writes, defending the church. And that is, Henry VII had another son before Henry, okay? He had a son that he named Arthur. This is Arthur here. Why do you think he called his son Arthur? Think back to, Chris, did you do King Arthur as your medieval presentation? Chris, did you do King Arthur?
Yeah, I did do King Arthur.
Okay, so why do you think Henry VII named his son, out of the marriage that's bringing the two families together after they warred for 6 years, right? Why do you think he named his son Arthur?
I'm not sure.
Anybody else?
Because they like the name Arthur.
Well, it could be because they liked the name Arthur. It could be also because they liked what Arthur represented. Right? Arthur represented that sort of legendary first king of England. The Knights of the Round Table, everybody working in collaboration and cooperation with each other. Right? So Arthur was actually the firstborn. As the firstborn child, Arthur should have been the heir to the throne. And so Arthur was married to Catherine of Aragon. So these two, Arthur and Catherine, are married. And then, before Henry VII dies, Arthur dies. So who's next in line to Henry's throne? Henry VIII.
Henry VIII.
VIII, yeah. Right. With Henry VIII being next in line, and still desiring to have this connection between England and Spain, it was decided that this Henry should get married to Catherine of Aragon, to his brother's widow. Is that cool? To marry your brother's wife?
Probably not.
Probably not, okay? Even today, that's sometimes looked on as being a bit sketchy. It happens, right? But in this case, it was an issue, right? You were not allowed to marry your brother's wife, even if your brother is dead and the wife is a widow now. Okay? So, Henry VIII had to get a dispensation from the Pope. He had to get special permission from Rome to be allowed to marry his brother's wife. Oh, so the Pope in Rome gave them special permission. And now Henry is trying to say, I should never have been married to her in the first place. I want this marriage annulled. And there's only two ways, or there's only one way you can annul a wedding or a marriage in the Catholic Church. Let me start here. There are two parts to a marriage in Catholicism. Part one, you get married in the church. You have your weddings.
Wait, what?
You have your celebration.
Having kids.
Is it
the process that it takes to have kids? Yes.
What happens after you get married? You go on your
Honeymoon.
Yeah,
it's
honeymoon.
And all
Yeah, that's it.
Presumably, what you're doing on your honeymoon is
Yeah.
having sex.
Yeah, having happy
You have to have
Very nice.
You have to consummate the marriage. And it is not a complete marriage until that happens. There were some weird practices that went on back in the 1500s and 1600s, and even before that, to make sure that a marriage completed those two steps. Initially, it started out as the parents of the bride and the groom were in the room while the act was being done, right, to witness that, yes, we see this happening. Eventually, yeah, that's embarrassing, isn't it? Eventually, it turned into, in some cases, like 10 or 12 people from the court watching to see what it was that was going on. It also then turned into that checking to make sure the female was a virgin when they got married. And so it was the checking what's left behind on the sheets afterwards. So very, 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 very nosy into what people were doing on the first night of their wedding night or whenever. So the only legal way that Henry can get his marriage annulled is to say, we never had sex. But they had kids, right? So everybody knows you guys have had sex. So that's not going to work. So what Henry has to do is write to the Pope. It's a different Pope than the one that gave the dispensation to him in the first place. And he has to write to the Pope and say, that first Pope was wrong. He never should have given the dispensation. And he should never have allowed me to marry my brother's wife. What is Henry asking his Pope to state? That the first Pope was wrong, and our Pope's wrong.
No.
A Pope is never wrong, okay? Popes are infallible. And so the Pope refuses to give Henry his annulment. He can't do it. Does that make sense to you? He can't take back what the other Pope did. Because then he's saying the other Pope was wrong, and that just doesn't happen. Side note, okay, and there's always interesting side notes. The Pope in Rome has recently become a prisoner. Charles V has invaded Italy and taken the Pope prisoner. So would the Pope ever be allowed to say, yeah, divorce Charles's aunt? Would Charles let that happen? Divorce my aunt. Go ahead. No. So it wouldn't happen anyway, okay, because of this that's going on. So Henry has to figure out a new way of doing things. Right? It's obviously not going to work through the church. And he goes back home and works with his advisors, right, with church experts, with lawyers, to try to find some way out of this problem. How can he work within the church and yet get rid of his wife who's not giving him voice? Now, Henry, being the guy that he is, has already started to look for love elsewhere. He's already started to find an appropriate female companion, and he finds that in, that's Charles V capturing the Pope. He finds that in Anne Boleyn, and he starts fooling around with her. And lo and behold, she gets pregnant. If Henry is not married to her when she gives birth, is that child an heir to the throne?
No.
No. Okay? Henry must divorce Catherine and marry Anne to make this child legitimate. So he needs his divorce, his annulment now. So what he does is he appoints a new archbishop for England. Now, archbishop is the top church person in a nation. Yeah? Are you boogieing away back there?
What?
Boogieing away back there?
Wait, Miss, is this the crazy one that divorce beheaded?
Yes.
Like, oh, it's a crazy one.
Yes, it is a crazy one. Okay. This new Archbishop then, because he's been appointed by Henry and not the Pope, who is the Archbishop's boss?
Is it Henry?
It's Henry. Henry's the boss. Okay. And so Henry says, first job you're going to do, Archbishop Cranmer, is you are going to grant me a divorce. And so Henry gets his divorce and he marries Anne. And if you want a date, just for timeline, this is 1533. So we can see how long this issue has been going on for already. Because Henry has created the Archbishop, he has now become the head of the church in England. Right? It's not the Pope anymore, but Henry himself. Henry's the boss of the Archbishop. Now, as head of the church, and because Henry needs money, Henry is going to start taking the property of the church away and putting it into the nation's treasury. So he starts taking cash money, he starts taking land, he starts taking some of the goods that they have in the churches, and he puts it into the nation's own treasury. He gives it to himself, but he also gives a lot of the land, especially. He gives a lot of the church lands away. There's two groups of people that he'll give it to. Who do you think Henry will give the land to? What's one group that Henry would see this is a good thing to give some of these treasures to? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Never mind, I'll come back to you in a bit. Sorry.
Okay. All right, that's okay. Any ideas who Henry might try to give away the land and the money and the cash? Brianna?
Maybe nobles to garner their support.
Nobles to thank them for their support. Okay, thank you. Okay, Griffin, you've been supporting me all this way. And you've been 100% behind me. Here's some thanks. Here's another estate or another manor for you to have. Here's a bunch of jewels for you to have. But also, okay, Daniela, I know you've been pushing back against this. I know you don't like what I did by making myself the head of the church. If I give you some land and some money, will that make you feel better about it? Sure, okay. So people were thanked, and also, as you say, Rihanna, to garner, to gain support from more nobles. Now, if you took land, A&T, if you took land, are you now part of this process? Are you complicit?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it's bringing everybody on side with Charles. The people who were unhappy with the challenge to the church and the people who were pro-Protestant. Okay. Now, I want you to understand, Henry didn't have any desire to change the way the church worked. He liked Roman Catholicism. He liked the authority of the Pope, except when the Pope wouldn't give him a divorce. Okay. He didn't really want to change the church. He just wanted to control the church. But most of Henry's closest advisors were, there's Henry being the head of the church, and most of Henry's closest advisors were pro-Protestant. Okay? This guy here, especially, Thomas Cranmer, and, I'm forgetting their names here. This is Thomas More. They're all Thomases. Cardinal Wolsey, and I don't remember that guy's name. I should put his name down. But they're pro-Protestant, and so what they will do is slowly and sneakily they will make little teeny tiny changes, right? Minor change after minor change. Henry does actually fight them on a lot of the changes that they make because he didn't want to change up the practice. If you go into an Anglican church today and compare it to a Catholic church, okay, you will see they're very, very, very similar in their practices. They're not all. Some become what is called high Anglican, and some become what is called low Anglican. The low Anglicans are more Calvinist, and the high Anglicans are closer to Catholicism. But the practices are very, very similar, and that's partly because Henry VIII does push back and push back and push back against the changes that his advisors want to make. Aidan, you did Thomas More as your Renaissance speed dating guide. What happened to him? Do you remember? Aidan, do you remember what happened to your guy, Thomas More? Well, he initially, just to give you a quick, initially, Thomas More was one of Henry VIII's closest advisors. But when Henry VIII took over control of the church, Thomas More was like, oh no, you've gone way too far. Supported him through trying to get the divorce, trying to get the annulment and all that kind of stuff, but you cannot have control of the church. And guess what happened to Thomas More?
He died.
Off with his head. Yes, he was executed by, as were many of Henry VIII's advisors and wives. So here we are then. We have Henry in control, a church that is slowly changing into a Protestant-style church with Henry in charge of it. And Henry has gotten married to Anne Boleyn. Yes, we must get married. And Anne Boleyn gives birth to a bouncing baby.
It's a girl.
It's a girl. Bouncing baby girl. Named, anybody know?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. Yes, okay. Elizabeth is...
I'm too good.
Okay. This is Elizabeth I, okay, that you may be familiar with. There have been lots of movies and so on made about Elizabeth I. Okay. Well, yeah, okay, so she's given birth to a girl. That's quite disappointing. The whole point was to have a boy. Henry now has 2 live living children. Mary from his first wife and Elizabeth from his second wife. Okay. And then Anne decides to have an affair. Oh, that's not good. Well, I'll tell you, and Henry has already given up on her, and his eyes have gone elsewhere. She obviously can't have male children, so it's time to move on to somebody else. And Anne has sought love in other places besides the king. Well, it's one thing for the king to have affairs. It's a completely other thing for the queen to be going around having an affair. And so, of course, Anne will be arrested and tried for treason, which is what it is. It's treasonous to have an affair when you're the queen, and she will lose her head and will be executed. I don't have a picture of execution, okay, but the beginnings of it. Presumably, Henry still loved Anne. He'd gone having flirtations with others, but he still loved Anne, and therefore he paid big bucks to have the #1 swordsman from France come over to do the deed, so that it would be quick and painless, presumably. I'm not sure whether chopping off your head is ever painless or quick. Maybe. I don't know. Never experienced it. Don't want to. Henry will go on to marry another person. Jane Seymour. This is Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour, presumably, was the one person that Henry truly loved. And she was a noble woman. She was a woman who spent a lot of time at court, and apparently he was quite enamored of her. She did give birth to a child. She did give birth to a baby boy. There he is here, Edward. Unfortunately, this baby is a sickly child.
How do I spell her name?
Possibly. Jane Seymour, Seymour.
Thank you.
Jane would die in childbirth. You're welcome. And Edward would be a sickly child. With Jane dying in childbirth, this does give us an idea. Oh, have we all gone off camera? Can we go on camera, please, everybody? We'll go on camera. Thank you. Okay. Our indication is that Henry really did love her because he didn't have it. Already divorced one wife, executed another, and the third had died. Right? That might be a little scary, mightn't it? Right? And think about it. She's a woman who has grown up in this Lutheran, so a very closed, kind of plain lifestyle, and off to make a life and a family with a man that she doesn't know. I do have on here a picture of what Henry looks like by about now. Okay? So not the young man that he was. He's very much an older man. Anne of Cleves would be in her early 20s. And she was about 21 or 22 when Henry agreed, yeah, I'll marry her. Okay. So there's a bunch of stories about what happened when Henry met her in person. My favorite one has to do with her traveling across. So you think about traveling from the Netherlands into England. It's not a long voyage. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump across the channel. So Anne comes with a few courtiers, a few of her ladies in waiting, and she arrives. Henry has put on the dog, okay? Like, he has put on a big show. He's got the brass band, he's got the red carpet, he's got a whole entourage with him. He heads down to the docks. She comes off the boat. She has the veil over her face. Right? She comes off the boat. He goes to meet her. He lifts up the veil. And he turns around and he walks away, saying, "She looks like a horse." He was not impressed. They got married anyway, because that was what had been planned. But they never consummated their marriage. They lived apart, and after a few months, the marriage will be quietly annulled. Anne will spend the rest of her life in England, well supported by Henry. Henry makes sure that she has money, she's got a nice place to live, she's got good servants to look after her, but she will never see him. Daniela, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to confirm if when he chose to marry her, if she had a say in the matter or not.
Not at all. Her parents would. So her father and her mother would have. Her father would have been the vocal one, having to say. And mother would have been back home, yipping at father. Do this, do that, right? That's the way females have their power. But no, as a young female, not at all. Henry says, enough with the strategic marriages, okay? You guys screwed up. That Catherine of Aragon one didn't work. Anne of Cleves didn't work. I'm picking. Right? I'm going to marry somebody fun, somebody young, somebody beautiful. And so he picks his next wife. right, who is Catherine Howard. Yeah. She is young. She is vivacious. She is super flirtatious. She has had lots of ongoing affairs. Keep in mind that affair doesn't necessarily mean that she's having sex with them. Very important strictures about being a virgin when you got married, but you can still have lots of fun. And she often flirted with the male courtiers, all the other males that were at court. And when Henry VIII turns his eye on her, she's like, woohoo, yes, right? There is something attractive about having the powerful older male pay attention to you. And she's having fun with him. The king is paying attention to her. Wow. Right? And the king decides then that he wants to marry her. The problem is, he is 50 by now. He has put on a lot of weight. He is not physically active anymore. He's not able to keep up with her. Right? And she doesn't get her fulfillment from him. So she fairly quickly continues her flirtatious ways with other people. Right? Not just with Henry. Because Henry can't keep up with her. And what happens to a queen who is flirting with other people? Off with her head. Okay? Henry will get married one last time to this woman now, Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr seemed to be a reasonable choice for Henry. She's a widow. She's already had, so she's already had a marriage. She's already had children of her own. She's had 2 boys, 2 girls, so she can do both. She's older, so she's not likely to get caught up in court romances. Proven herself as a baby maker. This should be good, right? They get married, and then Henry died before they had any children. So, Henry has gone through his wives. Okay. Only one has survived him. Well, technically, Anne of Cleves did. Okay. I guess 2 survived him. And he dies. Who's the heir to the English throne? Mary, Elizabeth, or Edward?
Could you say the name of the last wife again? It glitched out.
Yeah, sorry, Catherine Parr, P-A-R-R. All of Catherine's are spelled differently. Okay, Catherine of Aragon is with a C. Catherine Howard is the K and the Y. And Catherine Parr is the K and an A. So they're all spelled differently. It's okay. That one you don't need to worry about that. Who will be the heir? Mary's the oldest child, then Elizabeth, then Edward.
Probably Mary.
Makes sense, Mary.
I think it's Edward.
Why?
Because, like, they need a man, so they want the man.
And so 10-year-old Edward, sickly 10-year-old Edward, will become King of England. We're at 1547, just to give you a timeline. What's going on in Europe in 1540s?
Stuff.
Yes! Exactly. Are they going through some battles now over religion? Yes. Okay. And right at the moment, England has avoided those battles of religion. Okay. Now, Edward was raised Protestant, right? And his advisors were Protestant. Griffin, go ahead.
What year did he say it was again?
1547.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Edward will be raised Protestant, and his advisors are Protestant, which means that he he will do a lot of work reforming this Church of England, or the Anglican Church, to make it kind of more in line with what's going on in the Western European. But he is sickly, and he will die when he is 16. So 1553, he will die. Obviously, no heirs. He's not got married. He hasn't had any children. Done some work on the church. But now somebody needs to take over the throne. So, Mary or Elizabeth. It's got to be one of those two, and that's okay, right? It's okay to have the girl, right, the female. Mary, the Catholic one, and Elizabeth, who's Protestant. Catholic supporting nobles will want Mary. Protestant supporting nobles will want Elizabeth. Could we end up in war? The very war that everybody's been trying to prevent? Anika? No? Griffin?
Oh, sorry, what was the question?
Oh, no, you had your mic on, so I just...
Oh, I didn't notice.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Not a problem. Okay. Mary has a legitimate claim to the throne. She was the firstborn child of the firstborn marriage, right? Of the first marriage, sorry, not the firstborn marriage. So Mary's got a legitimate claim. But Protestants will claim Henry and Catherine should never have been married in the first place, therefore Mary is an illegitimate child, and it's Elizabeth who is the only rightful heir. The two sides start gathering together their armies to do battle over who will take over. We could be at war. Fortunately, or maybe not. It is Mary's army that arrives in London first, and so Mary claims the throne of England. And Elizabeth is quickly arrested so that she can't claim the throne.
I might be wrong, but wasn't Mary recognized as the Queen of Scots?
Different Mary, right?
Different
She'll be
Mary.
coming into our story, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Different Mary. Yeah. All right. Mary then is the Queen of England. She is Mary I, right? And she will rule for a time period. We will pick up her story on Friday. Rihanna, go ahead.
Did any of these siblings ever get to know each other and have a relationship with each other?
Little bit, okay? A little bit of a relationship. The two who had the closest relationship were Elizabeth and Edward. And part of that is because of Henry VIII's last wife, Catherine Parr. She often brought the children to her house when they were little. To sort of connect with each other. So it was kind of nice, and she saw her job as mother to these motherless children. And so they had a relationship. Mary was considerably older than her stepbrother and stepsister. And we'll see on Friday that she had kind of an isolated life. So Mary's relationship was not a close one, although she certainly did know both Elizabeth and Edward. But they grew up in usually separate households. Any other questions about today's material? It's kind of a neat story, isn't it? Right, so what I want you to do, continue working on your paper. I can stop this. continue working on your paper. Let me see everybody. Cameras on, everybody.